Welcome to Meliora's channel, your go-to place for C# and data analysis tutorials, products hands-on demos, and insider secrets to keep you at the cutting edge of innovation. Our goal is to break down complex tech topics to a level that you will easily understand to supercharge your skills. Without further ado, let's jump right in.
Okay, welcome back. So in today's lecture, we're just going to talk about stored procedures in MySQL. Stored procedures are a type of stored routine, the other being stored functions. So they are user-defined operations that are stored within the database. So in this lecture, we're simply going to go over how to create a stored procedure, how to call your created stored procedure, and then how to drop one after. So jumping right in, we are going to create a stored procedure called sal underscore percentile. So this stored procedure is going to find the percentile of a salary value. So going through the steps of what we are going to achieve, we're going to create a variable to store the total number of values less than the provided salary. We're going to call that K just for this. And then we're now going to count the total number of values n into another variable. So the total number of values in the array is going to be n, and then the number of values less than the value provided is going to be k. And then we're now going to use the formula k divided by n times 100 to find the salary percentile. Okay, so let's begin. First things first, we want to set the delimiter to something other than the semicolon. So you can see right there, we are currently using a double dollar sign for the delimiter for this example. And the reason you want to set a new delimiter is because you're going to be using this when you are writing the SQL statements in the stored procedure, and this is already the default end of statement. So this lets MySQL know, okay, that's an end of statement. So if you don't change the delimiter, the stored procedure may terminate prematurely before being taken all up into the server. So it may not take it all up, and you may start getting errors. So you want to always set the delimiter so that it knows, okay, this is the end, this is the beginning of the stored procedure, this is the end. So you take all that as a stored procedure. As for a simple way of explaining. So when we first write this whole statement there, so we set the delimiter as double dollar signs, then what we now want to do is create the procedure using a create statement, give it a name, and define the inputs and outputs and then their data types. So we're going to achieve this using the create procedure statement, and then this is now the name of the stored procedure, which is sal percentile, so that's salary percentile. So the in is we're going to get is a salary value. So in is just showing that this is the input into the procedure, then SAL for the name of the input, and then the data type of the input is going to be an int, an integer. Now, salary figures are usually decimals, but since the table we created, they are all whole numbers, so we're just going to use int for simplicity. And then the out, this is now the output we're going to get from this procedure with name of the output, which in this case we gave it part for like the percentile. And then the output is going to be a float because again we're getting a percentile, so it's going to be a percent that's probably going to have some decimal places, so we want to make sure we let it know that it's going to be a float. Okay, and this is how we are now slowly building out the procedure. So there we go. So the first two lines, so the delimiter, we have set it to the double dollar sign, and then we now have our create procedure, sal underscore percentile. We have now defined the input here and then the output along with their data types. Okay, so now let's just go ahead and reset the delimiter. So this is the beginning and this is the end of the creation of the stored procedure. So we're setting the delimiter back to the semicolon. And then in the middle, in the body of it, we are now going to have our begin and end so that we set, so this is the beginning of the stored procedure, the actual logic, and then this is the end. And you can see we're now putting that new delimiter at the end here. So it's letting it know that this is now the end of the stored procedure. So you can see we set the delimiter, it set this as the end. So all of this will be taken as the stored procedure. Anything within this block, the begin and end. Okay. So now that we have successfully created the skeleton for our stored procedure, we can now start filling it out with what we want to achieve. So remember the steps we're going to do, because we're going to do each of these. So first, we're going to create a variable to store the total number of values less than the provided salary, which is k. Then we're going to count the total number of values in the array. In this case, the whole salary column, which is n. I'm going to put that into another variable. And then we're now going to use the formula k divided by n times 100 to find the salary percentile. Okay, keep that in mind. So first things first, we are going to now declare our two variables that you just saw. So I've just put one. So we have num lower. So this is going to be essentially k, which is going to carry the the number of values that are less than the value we're going to put in our in, which is sal, and then the total num, which is also an int, which is going to be the number of numbers in the array, the total number. So that's our k and that's our n. Okay, and then we now want to start writing out our SQL statement. So we're going to just do it like normal. Select count all into num lower. So very important. So now we are assigning the results of this query into this variable that we've already previously declared. So select count all into num lower from employee data where, important, the salary is less than sal, which is this input value here. Remember, we want all the values less than it. We want to count that, and there we have that. And then we now want to select count salary again, n, all the total numbers into num total into this one from employee data. So now we've gotten our two variables and we have now put data into them. Okay, and then the last and final step that we are going to do is we are now going to set the output. So we're going to put set is equal to the num lower divided by the total num. So don't forget, this is our k and that's our n, and then times 100. So this is now going to give us the percentile, which is, this is going to be in the form of a percentage, and that's going to tell us the percentile of the salary value in relation to all the other salaries in the table. Okay, so here we are in MySQL, and then this is the stored procedure that we just finished typing out. Let me just go ahead and set our use statement for our database. So there, so that it knows we're using MelioraDB. Okay, so we can see where we are setting the delimiter here. We are creating the stored procedure, sal percentile, the in and out, and this is now where we are setting the output, which we gave it the name perth, to be equal to our k divided by our n times 100. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that. And if we've done that very well, if we go ahead and refresh, we have now successfully created the stored procedure sal underscore percentile, as you see there. And we can see even if when we click on it, there the procedure, the parameter sal, which is an input, you can see is of type int, and perth, which is the output of that procedure of type float. Okay, so on to the next part. Now that we've created the stored procedure, let's find out how to actually make use of it. So to make use of it, we simply use the call statement to call our stored procedures and use them. So this is an example here. I have call sal underscore percentile, then our input is 50,000. And then notice that we have something called at percent or whatever, just a name. And so that's a session variable, and we're actually using that to capture and store the output of this stored procedure. So when we now use the select statement and say select at percent, then it's now going to give us the value that we have gotten after calling that stored procedure. Okay, and so we are now back where we were before. So let's go ahead and start writing out the function that you just saw, which again we're putting in 50,000. And then we are now going to use a session variable psend to get the output of that stored procedure. And then when we want to access the value contained there, all we have to do is select at psend. So let's go ahead and just run all that. And psend is giving us 0, simply because 50,000 is the lowest salary on our salary table. So it's in the lowest percentile. What if we change this to 70,000 instead? And now we are getting 45.45 and some. So that is how our SAL percentile is working. So people who are earning this are earning more than 45% of the people here. You can see that we have a lot of decimal places, so we can actually clean up the output a bit. Let's round up to 2 decimal places instead, and that's what we get. A bit of a cleaner result. So yeah, that's how you call your stored procedure, how you store the variable, and that's how you can now use it throughout the whole session, because this is a session variable in MySQL. And this is just a slide explaining what you already saw, because we put 50,000 and percent was 0. So this is a select all from employee data function, as you can see, and it's sorted from the lowest to the highest, and we can see that the lowest salary is in fact 50,000, which is why it's 0, because there are no salary values lesser than it. It's the last. Okay, so we've created our stored procedure, we've called it and stored the results in a session variable. Now let us go ahead and delete our stored procedure, which is very simple. So now we are just going to go ahead and drop sal underscore percentile. So dropping is again very, very easy, just like dropping a database or a table or any database object. So you just simply write drop procedure. It's a good practice to write if exists, so that we don't throw any errors if it doesn't. So drop procedure if exists sal underscore percentile. So this is the simple function that we are actually just going to use to drop the stored procedure we've just created. Okay, and we're back in MySQL. So there we go, drop procedure if exists, and then the procedure name. And then let's just go ahead and run successfully. And you can see almost immediately, sal percentile is no longer there. So we have successfully deleted that procedure. Alright, with that, that brings us to the end of this lecture on introducing you to stored procedure. So you've learned how to create one for finding the percentile of a salary value in an array, or really any numeric value in an array you choose. And we've now learned how to call it and store the output of that stored procedure, and also how to drop the stored procedure. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.